Thanks for tuning in to the Prime Bookseller Podcast, the bi-weekly podcast discussing all things Amazon bookselling.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Prime Bookselling Podcast. I'm Eric, and we're back with another episode. Today we're talking about something that everybody loves in the Amazon selling sphere, and that's stranded inventory. And so I'm going to tell you what I know about stranded inventory. I'm going to also tell you that typically in my business model, again, I don't know how much I've said this on this podcast, but this is something I preach to people that know me all the time. I'm a very lazy bookseller. And because of that, I just try not to get dwelled into these little things that can drive you mad. And I feel like stranded inventory is one of these things. So basically, what is stranded inventory? Stranded inventory really only affects you if you're an Amazon FBA seller. So this is only ever going to happen to product that you have in Amazon's warehouse. And what it's saying is that Amazon is basically telling you that for some reason they have this item in the warehouse, but for some reason it's not showing for sale on Amazon. And there is a ton of reasons why this can happen. It can just be a simple glitch where you uploaded a listing to Amazon and it didn't take, or it didn't get properly uploaded, it errored out, and now there's no physical listing for the item, and you have to go back and regenerate the listing. It can be because Amazon has flagged it for some reason and said that this listing can't be shown. A common reason that might happen is because Amazon says, well, the product page doesn't have an image, or the image doesn't meet our standards, so they'll suppress it and it'll go into your stranded inventory. It could also be because of restrictions. So maybe you sent in a book and Amazon decided later that, oh no, nobody's allowed to sell this book, or maybe for whatever reason, just you're not allowed to sell this book. So then they restrict that listing from you. And then basically now Amazon has created the environment where this listing is no longer showing because it's restricted. You have it in physical inventory at Amazon. So Amazon's saying, hey, this is stranded. What do you do about stranded inventory? Well, what I see a lot of Amazon sellers doing about this problem is that they sit and they let their brain fry trying to figure out why all these items are stranded. And personally, it's up to you. If this is something that's very important to you, that, I need everything to run smoothly, I need everything to run perfectly, I can't lose money on any single item because that's just not how I want to run my business, that's great. Then you can tackle with the struggles of stranded inventory. You should go in there, you should try to fix everyone, you should try to learn why these are happening. And probably in the end, if you do that and you don't lose your mind, you're probably a better seller as a whole. But what's in my experience is going in and trying to figure out why Amazon has stranded this inventory, it's not worth it. It's just the data they give you to tell you why it's stranded is cryptic. It makes no sense. They tell you that you need to do this certain thing and you do it and it still stays stranded. And it's just a huge frustration. So this is what I would tell you, is that personally how I handle this is that all I ever do, so there's a setting, if you go into settings in your Amazon account, there's FBA settings. There's settings to just have stranded inventory removed. And I just have it removed every 30 days and just don't even bother with it. If you want to go in there and look at the stranded inventory, if you go under Manage Inventory in your Seller Central account, it'll bring up all your inventory. There's actually a link right at the top that says stranded inventory. It will tell you all your stranded inventory. If you want to go in there and try to figure out how to learn how to fix some of them, maybe you can fix the really easy ones. But in the end, you're not going to be able to fix all of them. They're just going to be some of these items that for whatever reason, they're just going to stay stranded. And at a certain point, you have to let those items go. I have chosen to go the lazy way and just say, I'm not even going to pay attention to that. And as long as my stranded inventory, as long as they're not culling 9,000 items, or, let's just use a more rational number. As long as the amount of items that they're culling in a month are very minimal. Like if I lose 1 or 2 books a month because of stranded inventory, I'm fine with that. And so I just let them remove it, move on with my life, and I don't even pay attention. And I highly recommend that every seller does that, or at least you can be more aggressive with it than that if you want, because that's the pretty dramatically easy way to do it. But the biggest point I want to make with this episode is do not sit and obsess over this and just to the point where you make yourself mad, because I see people all the time posting on Facebook groups and things like that are doing exactly that. They're like, oh my God, I have this item of stranded inventory. I don't know what to do. The world's going to collapse. My whole business is going to fail. And it's like, no, sometimes you just have to let an item go. And if it's really, really important to you, you can always go in there and you can request that Amazon sends the item back to you so you don't lose that coveted item. And I would recommend, because more than likely if you send it back in, you're going to have problems with it again. So don't even bother to try and send it back in. Just move on with it. Put that book up on eBay, move on with your life. But there isn't a whole lot for me to say about stranded inventory beyond that, because that's my philosophy with stranded inventory. And I think that's a pretty solid strategy, because I do get onto a lot of calls with other Amazon sellers and they're struggling with this stuff and they are infinitely frustrated. And I'm just like, no, I just don't worry about that. And again, from my philosophy, what's more important for you as a bookseller is to be happy and enjoy what you're doing, rather than losing, minimizing your losses because of stranded inventory. Well, if stranded inventory makes you insane, then it's worth losing the money to not have to deal with it. I can say all the wonderful things and all the bad things I want about Amazon, but like they do fail in this space where these systems don't work the way I feel they should, because they should be pretty cookie cutter about how to manage this stuff, and it's really not. It's cryptic, it's confusing. And when it's cryptic and confusing, you just have to do the best you can, and sometimes that means just walking away and not worrying about it. That said, there are times, now actually haven't seen this happen in a very long time, but there were times in Amazon's history where one day half my inventory would go stranded. And to this day, I could not even tell you how this would happen. But in those instances that happened, I assume it was just some sort of computer system error on Amazon's end. But the best way that I have found to fix those items, when it appears like a huge amount of items, if a huge amount of items go stranded, that is something you want to address, because it's one thing if you're losing 1 or 2 items a month, but if suddenly half your inventory is stranded, that's a big problem. And the best way to do that is, and I'm going to give you a brief breakdown, so you'll have to do some research to figure out how to do this, but the best way to do this is to fully remove your SKUs for those items from the Amazon catalog. This is the best way I have found to fix it. You remove those items. So now what that means is, normally when you remove an item from Amazon, you're not removing the listing per se. You're just like, a better way to describe this, if you're familiar with the way the Amazon ecosystem works, is you're removing the quantity from the item, but you're not removing the SKU, if that makes sense. And the best way to fix this is there's another option in there where you can completely delete and close out the listing so it completely disappears from your account. Now, when you do that, I like I said, I haven't done this in years, so I'm not sure if this is still the way it works, but I would assume it is within Amazon systems. When you completely delete that SKU out, even though it doesn't show up in your system, for some reason with Amazon's systems, you have to wait 24 hours before you can reuse that SKU. If you use it within 24 hours, Amazon will kick back an error and say you can't use that SKU because it had existed in the system or something. It must be some like buried computer system that we can't really see, and that SKU still in there, and it takes 24 hours before it disappears from that system. So, but if you wait 24 hours and re-upload all those items as brand new listings, very important, they have to have the same SKU. You cannot create new SKUs because then Amazon has no way of mapping the FBA listing to the SKU. Okay? So the SKUs have got to remain the same when you do this. But if you delete out all the old listings that are causing problems, re-upload new listings, a lot of times that will fix at least the majority of the listings. There's always, like I said, with stranded inventory, there is always going to be listings that it just, no matter what you do, it seems like you'll never fix them. And that's why I just tell you that in some instances you have to let this go, and just it's a cost of doing business on Amazon. But in the instance that you have a large amount of them, you can try this strategy and it should fix most of the stranded inventory. And if it does not, what I would highly recommend is that we do at Kingsridge Media offers a bookseller support service. And if you're stuck with this for a very, very nominal yearly fee, you can have access to our team at any time, submit a question, and have somebody from our team look at it. So I would highly recommend that I feel free to drop me an email at sales@Kingsridge Media. Say, hey, I'm experiencing this issue. If that issue is something that's really simple that I can tell you an explanation of how to fix, I'll do that at no charge. But if it's going to require somebody digging deeper into it and really putting some stuff together, will make that option offered for a yearly fee of $60. We can submit this to our team, and the team will put together a solution for you. Again, but if you have one SKU that for whatever reason you cannot get it to switch out of stranded inventory, again, our bookseller support team will probably just tell you to let that book go, because it is not worth the stress in the dwelling to fix it. Because like I said again, I know I've said this 50 times on this podcast, but I want to make it very clear that sometimes with stranded inventory, you just can't fix it. And why that is, I don't know. Would Amazon know that? Probably not. So just realize that this is one of those things that if you become obsessed with it, it can essentially ruin your business, because it's going to become frustrating. It's going to become distracting. And it's one of these things that might get you to the point where you're like, I don't want to do this anymore because I don't want to deal with that crap. And it is very important as you're building a business, any business, it's not just an Amazon business, but when you're building anything like this, is that those triggers that make you turned off by what you're doing, you have to avoid them at all costs. And if it's costing you $20 to not have to stress about stranded inventory, that is a very, very good investment for your business. And I highly recommend you take advantage of it. Again, I think this might be a very controversial episode for a lot of people, because I think that the general bookseller that I will see will highly disagree with this, that you have to be very, very diligent about this kind of stuff so you're not losing money, which seems like a good advice, but I also think there's a certain balance between being diligent and just overstressing yourself out. And in the end, I would take not stressing yourself out and maybe losing a little bit of profit over overstressing yourself out to save $20. So with that, I'm going to wrap this episode up. I hope that kind of clears some stuff up about stranded inventory, makes it seem a little less overwhelming than it is. And as always, if you do have questions about it, anything you want to know, just drop me an email, sales@kingsridgemedia.com, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thanks for listening to the Prime Bookseller Podcast. Join us for the next episode as we discuss all things Amazon bookselling.